Hey there, my name's Ryan Kingsley. I'm the founder of Game Art Institute, and I've been training game artists and film artists and toy industry. I've been training artists for a long time on the skills that they need to learn to get a job and to level up in their career, starting with when I worked at Pixelogic and I was kind of like the main voice getting out there and spreading the gospel of digital sculpting. And what I want to talk to you about today is what makes art work. What is it that makes something successful and versus something else that's not so successful? All right. There's a couple of examples here in front of you on the screen. These are different sculptures that have been at different points, some controversial, some not. But the real dilemma, the real question that we as practitioners, how do we know when what we're doing is working or not working? What are some of the criteria, the parameters that help us get there? And one of the things that I think we really need to understand before we really get in and answer that question, in fact, I think it's essential for us to answer this question, is this notion, or it's this thing called brightness constancy. And this is a part of our perception and how humans perceive. And a simple test can be seen right here in front of you. The question that's in front of you is do these match? Now, arguably you look and you say, okay, yeah, this one's in shadow, it's a little bit darker. All right, I get that. But the question is this as dark as that? And if you're like most people, you're going to say, of course not. There's no way that's as dark as that, right? I mean, how could it be? They're right there, right here, right there, right there. I mean, you know, it's not the same thing. But you're wrong. In fact, they're almost identical. This has a value of 49, whereas this one up here at the top has a value of 46. They're almost identical in terms of their value. Their hue is a little different, their saturation, not that, but that's not what's important, because what we're seeing here is the lightness and brightness. But if you're looking at that, you're like, oh my God, that's unbelievable. That can't be the same value. But it is. How can that be? All right, now the key thing to keep in mind is don't adjust your screen. Brightness constancy has nothing to do with your computer or your monitor. It has everything to do with your brain. It's in your brain, right? For example, take a look at these two dots. Do they look the same to you? Now, by now you probably know that this is a bit of a trick question, but really look at that. Are they exactly the same? Are they different? They look very different to me, and I know for a fact that they're the exact same value. They're the same square, just moved from the light side to the dark side. See, the thing is we as humans, we don't care about the actual color value of the gray dot. That's not what our brain has evolved to process, to think about, to contemplate. We care about the value of the dot to our life. Not its color value, but its actual real-world value to our life. Is it dangerous? Can I eat it? Right? That's what's really important to us. And so our brain and our perception is built within this framework. Right? Our brains are more interested in the real properties of the world. That's the primary thing. In fact, if you look at this, you're probably seeing the image on the left over here, and you're probably saying that that is brighter than the shirt over on the right. But it's actually 13% darker. How can this be? It just blows my mind. It's important that we understand as we learn how to make our art work. It's important that we understand that the goal of our senses is to help us understand the world better around us, to help us survive. That's the key part. Is it dangerous? Can I eat it? Is it busy Friday night? What are you doing? What's up? So how does this affect us as artists? The key thing to understand about it is that what you think you see isn't what is real. Your perception is a construction. You took the blue pill, all right? There's no way around this. What you think you see is not what's real. And if you're in any doubt at all, just take another look at this and ask yourself as clear as you possibly can, are these the same value? Can they possibly be the exact same value? And the truth is they can, because that's how the brain works. And when we get in and we start to draw, right, here's a couple of examples of some drawings that aren't so good on this side and some drawings that are pretty dang amazing. Casey Bond, Zim Lim, which I just love this guy and his drawings, right? And the way in which he constructs his values and how the form moves over here. Versus if we take a look over here and how it's super dark and that's super dark and this is super dark and then this, you get all these little bits and then the form is going nutty over here. This is how it affects us as artists. Because see, our biology is set up for flight, fight, and a few other things. It's not set up for being an artist. There's no real survival value in painting pretty pictures at the end of the day, right? We have to learn how to build what I call structural constancy into our work, right? Like you think about brightness constancy, which is really a subset of a phenomenon known as perceptual constancy, which means that what you perceive is generally going to be the same across the board. What we have to do as artists is learn how to understand structural constancy, because structure is at the heart of what makes art work. If you look at the examples here in front of you, here's one example, and these are both they're the same sculptor done a year apart. In one case, poor guy was ridiculed online for this sculpture, which was his very first portrait bust. All right, I'd like to see anybody else get up there and make something in bronze and, have it be as awesome as they think it should be. Now, arguably, the airport should have pulled from a list of, professional sculptors that have done this many, many, many times, but that's a whole different cultural discussion. After a year of pain and pushing himself, the sculptor ended up pulling together this sculpture. Now, what I find fascinating about this sculpture is if you look close, you'll see there's very similar forms. The eyes are very similar here, right? The shape, there's the brow, but something's different. What's different? Right? If we come over here and we look at this is a portrait of Lucy, and then this was the one that was redone. I think this one was taken down, and there was a whole controversy. And this sculptor, eventually, if I understand correctly, stopped sculpting, which is an absolute pity, in my opinion. Because what's quote-unquote wrong with this sculpture is small little movements. Really, if you get past the whole perception of this and the uncanny valley, and you look at what's really different or what's could be changed about this, it's really just millimeters of clay, and that's it. But that's why it's important for you and I as artists to understand what makes art work, because it's millimeters of clay, little bits of polygons, little bits of clay, little bits of charcoal or pencil. It's little bits that add up to become the difference. And at the heart of this is structure. It doesn't have to be realistic, right? But successful work usually has structure. I love Egon. This guy it just drives me crazy. I love his form. There is structure to this form. There's the eighth rib. There's the lumbar section of the spine. There's a super strong, look at that, there's the anatomy of the scapula right there, okay? This is not just willy-nilly. He's not just giving into his perception. He is building structure. You can see in here the deltoid. He's got a little head of the humerus showing up there, which happens in skinnier people. And then he comes in, and that's a very accurate, sort of accurate dimension for the deltoid. He's got a strong little cheek in there. He's got this beautiful kind of external angular process of the frontal bone. He's putting structure into his work. See, structure is what makes our work humanish, if I can say that. Think about the difference between music versus noise. Music is sounds that's deliberately used in a repeating pattern. In fact, the structure with music at the end of the day is time. Noise has random pattern, random pitches. So it can be the exact same, but little bits of back and forth in it. Music is structure. I love this quote. It says, this is just totally online, just very random. It's just, what distinguishes music from noise is actually mathematical form. Noise and music are a mixture of sound waves, but music is considered ordered form, while noise is considered disordered form, right? And there's some amazing composers that have pushed this. Philip Glass is one of them, right? Stephen Reich. And they've pushed this notion of what sound actually is. So how do artists, visual artists, master structure? To master structure, the key thing that we do is, as figurative artists, is we use artistic anatomy. That's the core of it, right? And artistic anatomy's job is to take reality, as we see it here, and organize it into something that we can use, that can become part of our process. Reality, which is messy and very hard to, this has been dissected and dissected relatively well, right? And if it wasn't, there'd be even more of a mess and all kinds of fascia and all kinds of stuff going on. Artistic anatomy. Okay? When we learn artistic anatomy, we're able to take reference. We're able to take the real world and we're able to say, okay, yes, that is the malar mound. That's the malar mound. That's the, okay, well, no, maybe that's not the malar mound. That's the malar mound. But then what is this little bit right here? And over time we learn that's actually the medial cheek fat. There's the malar mound right in there. Okay, there's the malar mound. What is the, can I find the malar mound? It's tough. It's right there. But now there's these two other forms in there. And when we learn artistic anatomy, we learn the things that are, that'll help us in these situations. We get the tools to deal with the real world, because there's actually two different fat pads going on right there. There's the medial cheek and there's the zygomatic cheek fat. Those are very different. You don't see them all the time. And that's part of what makes things so hard as you're getting in and you're learning from the real world. It's always changing. You need something to be able to adapt and to adjust and to really kind of hit the nail on the head, right? And the way I think about artistic anatomy is that it has three stages. It has volume, which has a lot to do with shape, design, and proportion. It has structure, which I see as kind of functional anatomy, structural anatomy, and it has form, which I'd consider superficial anatomy. Things like the fat pads that we just kind of talked about and that we're going to talk about here in just in a little bit longer, right? I'm going to do a quick demonstration inside of ZBrush and give you a really cool look at how form impacts your sculpt. All right, I'm really excited about that. But before we get into that, the key thing that I want to impress upon you more than anything else is that I believe mastery is not magic, it is process. This is so incredibly important. It's not magic, it's process. If you want to be as good as somebody else, you need to learn the processes that they use. Okay? The problem is that the most common process for sculptors, for artists, for painters, for visual artists is they create volume, they push around form. Right? That's the problem that we're having here. It's the problem in my drawings. But the thing that makes these work is that they add one more element to the mix. Because see, when all you do is you put volume in and you push around form, you skip that essential phase. You skip what makes art work. You skip structure. Right? You can't just come into the volume and then throw a bunch of form on top of that, because it's not going to, the center will not hold, to quote Yeats. You've got to have a foundation for this to work. And we have to learn that, because our biology is not set up for us to know that. Our biology is set up again for fight, flight, to help us survive. We're dealing with a 1,000,000-year-old brain here. And as artists, We have to learn the tools that are going to give us structural consistency so that we can look at somebody, and it could be, somebody who is 20 pounds overweight, or it could be somebody who's 20 pounds underweight, and we still know where that form is. We still are able to find things. And see, the key thing that I want to do now, before we get into the actual form demonstration, is be really clear on what I consider the kind of core principles of artistic anatomy: volume, structure, and form, right? So the question right off the bat, what's volume, right? And I'm going to ask that of each one. What's volume? What's form? What's structure? What's form? Volume to me is shape in 3D. That's it. It's shape in 3D, and here are a few of your possible volumes. You're familiar with these. These are in any kind of VisCom class or beginning drawing class. This is the foundation of drawing. It's the foundation of artistic anatomy. Because at the center of everything is the volume of it. But what is structure? Because if you go out there and you learn artistic anatomy, you're confronted with so many different ways to evaluate structure, and that's important. It's good. It's useful, right? That gives us power, but it's also confusing and overwhelming for beginners. Is structure planes? Is it some kind of combination of primitive shapes? Is it concepts like this? This comes from Gottfried Bomis in one of his books. This is a concept that he has that helps to explain the whole orbit of the eye and how that's coming down and sets up for the nose right there. And the plane of that and how it shoots back and then establishes or set up for the muzzle of the mouth, right? It's a great concept. It's fantastic. But there are so many awesome concepts. You got imagery here from Sabin Howard, who is just an amazing sculptor, an amazing draftsman, and structure's a really key part of what he does. Okay, this looks like anatomy, but it's something different. See, structure is the relationship between parts or elements, right? So we know volume is shape in 3D. Structure is the relationship between parts or elements. That's the key thing. So we're going to go with that. We're going to say volume is a part. Structure is more than one part. Easy peasy, right? Here's two parts: the cranial section and the wedge for the face, or the mandible, or whatever you want to call it, the jaw area, right? There are these two different forms, two different volumes there. Together, that's the structure of the face. You could come in here and you could say, here's the cranium, right? So in this particular structural perspective, there's the cranium, then there's the cheek structure, then there's the maxilla structure, and then there's the jaw structure. Okay, and that's important too, because it helps us kind of see the connection between the maxilla coming into the front of the face, which is the maxilla is one of the least understood parts of the human body. The common mistake that people make is that they think structure equals anatomy. I mean, after all, here's a whole bunch of volumes and parts, right? This anatomy should be structure. But anatomy is designed to help doctors not kill us and do cool things and save us and all of this other stuff. That's the purpose of anatomy. That's the whole language of anatomy. Where something is lateral, like the vastus lateralis is the one on the outside. The vastus medialis is the muscle that's towards the center of your body. These help somebody on the surgery table, on the operating table, know, is it left, is it right? And be able to, from these words, navigate their way through and around your body. It's not designed for artists. Structure is not anatomy. Structure is infinitely more foundational than that. It's much more basic. And the reason why this is important, because when you say anatomy can often become superficially focused. And in being superficially focused, we can start to make mistakes, right? The muscles become about the bumps. But we start to miss certain structural elements like the knee. We don't get the femur and the bone properly in place with the essential structural elements to make those work. We get caught up in the bumps. This is what leads to forms swimming on the surface, right? Like if you think about what the difference is between, and this again, this is 1 year, same sculptor, 1 year difference. What's the difference between these? And again, look at the forms. Look at the nose. It's almost identical, but something is different, and that something is structure, which is another way of saying that the relationship between the nose and the relationship between the cheek and the relationship between the eye, he's gone in and he's figured this out better. In the image on the left, the nose, the eye, the cheek, all of those go crazy. And so chances are, if your sculpture isn't working, you don't have solid structural understanding of this area, which is actually one of the most common problematic places for beginners to intermediates. They just don't get the frontal process of the maxilla and the nasojugal groove and how it comes into the glabella and all the different wonderful forms that are in there. All right, this cheek kind of mixes in here with the malar mound or the zygomatic, and here he's got a lot more clarity going on in there. Okay, the eye and this little roof, this is called the roof or the orbicularis oris, you could call it, but this kind of upper eye fat in here, they merge here, and this fat kind of falls off to the side and the eye moves off in this area. So structure is what makes this piece work. And artistic anatomy, the easiest way to think about it, and this is a great image, I believe this is Bomas. If it's not, it's from my Italian guy, Structura Umo, and it's lowly, and on from there, I apologize, we'll put it up, but I'm pretty sure it's from Bomas. There's two guys I believe in, Bomas, and I believe in the Structura Umo. Those are amazing, and please don't kill me if I'm murdering that name. You have to. I won't defend myself as a clumsy American tongue. I'll just let you lambaste me. You can do as you wish. It's all good. Artistic anatomy is anatomy plus structure, and that's what Bomas really nails. That's what both of those guys really nail. Anatomy plus structure. So when you put the form in, you're tying down the insertion, the origin, and you're creating a simple shape for it. So notice the simple cross-section and how those cross-sections, it continue down all the way to the origin, right? It's not there. We're not leaving this as like a bump that's, there's a bump, there's a bump, there's a bump. This is a form that moves all the way down, and this is the form as it moves down. This is the shape that it's taking. You see it here, right in this area. Look at that shape. Knowing those cross sections, that's what makes this so powerful. And this is kind of the key to artistic anatomy. It's anatomy plus structure. When you learn that, you get the keys to the kingdom. Because see, knowing artistic anatomy helps us make this, or aspire to, right? I mean, this is Carpo, so we can all aspire to Carpo, and we can, your results will vary as my results vary. So what is form? All right, because we've looked at what volume is. It's just shape in 3D. We've looked at structure, and structure is just the relationship between parts, which is one of the reasons why it's so varied, because there's so many different ways for us to evaluate the structure. What the heck is form? All right, and form, as we saw, is basically any of the movements, the things on top of the surface. It's what's this? And this little bump, and this little bump, and you're getting a little bump here, and this, and there's a line, and all of these lines and these little bumps. Now this becomes our kind of conduit to form, our pathway to form, if you will. And I got a really cool exercise that I'm going to share with you. I think it's a really amazing way to look at how form influences us in our process. I think it's also really important as a quick reminder that process is power. Mastery is not magic, it's process. And so at certain points, we need to think about our process and go to that next level. All right, let me show you something real quick. All right, now here is a sculpt I did for one of my classes. This is a class demonstration, and it's a real quick little deal. And by real quick, I mean like it's about a couple of hours, about an hour of process in here, coming from the artistic anatomy, right? Coming all the way from this, building this out, and then establishing and starting to establish using Jeremy Irons as our reference. This is what I want to show you. This section right here. As I go from, let's pull that up right to that point where I lock down the first kind of stage of structure right here. Okay, so I want you to notice and pay attention to the difference between this and what is essentially going to be, I don't know, maybe 5-10 minutes of sculpting. And I want you to think about how much life is now in this model, right? How much more alive it seems with just one little thing that I did. And I'm going to show you exactly what I did. In fact, I'm going to do it right here in front of you. But it's fascinating to me kind of how this works and how little you need to do sometimes. But the real lesson here for me is that at some point in time, you're done. You're at this stage, and you couldn't finish this stage. You need to move to the next stage. So let's duplicate this off to the side, and then I'm just gonna pull that all the way back up because ZBrush has a lovely little feature I do not appreciate. So there. This is our structure, right? And I can keep working the structure, and I can come in here with the clay brush. This is my ball stylus that you can pick up at ZBrush workshops, and I keep trying to get this. But I have found myself going around in circles trying to get the halftones and then smoothing things out, because what I'm missing is this next stage. And the next stage is going to be putting fat pads in. All right, so I'm going to put these fat pads off to the side so I can kind of see them, and then I'll come over here and start to sculpt directly on my piece. I'll start by using a Damien standard brush, and the first thing I really need to do, and let's make sure my Z intensity is a little low, is put the nasolabial fold in there, because most of these fat pads are going to be above that. Okay, so they're about right there, and then I'm going to pull that down. There you go. Yeah, that'll work right there. All right, and what we're dealing with here, in fact, I should probably be a little bit more clear. Let's turn this on and turn solo off, and let's colorize that, and transparency on, and ghost. All right, so inside of the face, especially if we look right at this view, in fact, why don't we color these a little? Voila, switch colors. RGB color, fill object, back to white. Great. Right in there. Let's go into our piece. These little notes here, this is the fat pad, the subcutaneous fat of the face. And what we have here is the nasolabial fat pad. We have what's called the SOOF right in here. This is called the medial cheek. This is called the middle cheek. Okay, this is called the inferior jowl fat. This is called the superior jowl fat. And you'll find many different definitions of where these guys are. In some cases, you'll see them stacked right on top of each other, but up to you how it works. All right. Now, this is called right on the side here. There's a little fat pad right there. This is called the lateral orbital fat pad, which really just means the outside fat pad. And then, you know, you've got a big old fat pad moving like this. What do you think that's called? It's called the lateral temporal fat pad. And this is the roof right in here. Nasolabial fat pad, the medial fat pad, the middle cheek fat pad, the superior jowl fat, the inferior jowl fat, and then the lateral orbital eye fat, or fat pad. Those are going to be incredibly important for me as I go about the business. And the first thing that I need to do is just define them a little bit. So I'm going to come in and let's get the SOOF. In fact, where is the SOOF? Yeah, it's right there. Right there. People often miss how far out that fat pad goes on the face. Okay, and then I'm going to come in and let's get this lateral orbital fat pad, and then we'll get the temporal fat pad. There you go. But we can work on these guys right now. We've got the coming right here. We've got our SOOF. I'm going to come down, try to find this trough, and inside there, and there we go. That's the beginning section, and then I'll pull my nasolabial fat pad a little bit up over the nostril. Okay, this becomes frontal process of the maxilla and largely becomes bony structure right in there. And so then we look and we can say right underneath the where the corner of the mouth is, I'll pull a line across, and then I'll pull this up. There you go. So inferior, superior, nasolabial fat. That's how that whole form works out. And then we get this beautiful little triangle right here, coming right along that orbital rim, coming down, and that's our medial cheek fat. Then we can come and take this along the temporal, down, and we really just look for this plane break, really. That's not a bad place for us to pull. So we can come in and pull this down a little bit, and then across, and now we have our middle cheek, right? These these essential elements, like let's be very clear about these, because if you understand where these are, it's going to make a massive difference in your capacity. So here is my, we'll call this the nasal labial fat. Okay, and then we'll come in with let's do color. Shall we do color? And I'm partly doing this so that you have a moment to draw this out. Don't just listen, but get in there and become an active participant in your learning. All right, and I'll do each one of these a slightly different color. And then come in here to the blue, and I might have to repeat. Okay, and I don't think I chose that. It's a pretty healthy middle cheek. And then the temporal. Let's use a bright. Voila. What do you think? Temporal. It's really lateral temporal. Then there's the lateral orbital. There's the middle cheek. There is the inferior jowl fat. There's the superior jowl fat. There is the medial. It's not medium. It's not middle, sorry. It's medial cheek fat. Right? And then there's SOOF. Suborbital, blah, 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 blah. Right? And then there's roof right up in there, which is just beautiful. I love that whole fat pad. That's kind of is a big revelation for me. These are the fat pads. We put the structure in, we put the form in, and now the only thing that we've really done, or we're going to do, is we're going to go in and we're going to kind of work these fat pads. All right, now it's worth noting, that we've established a nice, good, strong, bony structure right there. And it's worth, these are also where there are ligaments and there are different tissue that are connecting things into the body. Like there's ligaments that connect the skin here and along here that kind of separate and that really help create a lot of the shapes that you see in older people. There's ligaments along here, there's a ton of these different things. We don't need to pay attention to those too much. What we got to do now is just get in there and make the most out of these regions. So I know where they are. Now I'm going to get in there and just say, okay, so what happens if, and I'll turn my Z intensity and I'll lower my, and let's lower the, there. I don't mind getting this a little messy. I'm kind of okay with that. many polys are we at? 200,000. All right. Drop it down. And let's increase the intensity. Pull that in. Do I have symmetry on? Yeah, good. Okay, roof. Yeah. I'm just going to throw a little bit of fat in there and a little bit of crazy surface. Okay, we didn't even get into fat pads that are right in this area or any of that stuff. Not essential just yet. But let's see what we can kind of do now and in terms of bringing this stuff to life. So I'm going to come in and smooth out a little bit of edges. Just adding a little bit of life in there. That's at least my goal, right? And I'm not trying to be too specific or precious about any of this. I'm looking to see if I have a process such as just, you know, outlining fat and sculpting that a little bit. Does that add life to my sculpt? Does that change my sculpt and make it look more empowered and more alive? That's the kind of ultimate question that we're trying to answer here. And I can kind of already see a lot of stuff happening in here. There's a lot more that I need to do to make this kind of work, in my view. And I'm going to kind of pull that fat pad up a little bit. There we go. There we go. But let's just compare this to what we had before. So I'm going to move that off to the side. And let's go back in time. Probably to what we had, yeah, right at the beginning. Yeah, cool. Is there a difference? Can you see how this has some essence, and now over time, and a couple more sculpts and a couple more little movements of me getting in there and kind of working the fat and trying to get some angles and working this and whatnot, just by going in there and adding in these different fat pads and thinking about them, just thinking about them, just by doing that, we added life to the sculpture. Because remember, what you think you see, what you know, like our brain is not designed to help us as artists. This is something that we do that's outside the scope of what our brain was designed to do. Our brain was designed to help us survive. That was the primary thing that it was designed to do. And as artists, if we want to do better, we need to get in here and learn and master structural constancy, artistic anatomy, and get clear on things like what happens from this angle and how as somebody ages, this infraorbital margin right here starts to recede. The bone itself starts to recede, whereas when somebody's younger, you really see this kind of pulling out and helping to define the whole orbit of the eye, right? But it all starts to go away, especially as somebody reaches Jeremy Irons' age. This whole thing starts to kind of tweak out and you start to lose it, okay? Form is this stuff that sits on top. It sits on top of all that work that you did. This is what I did in an earlier one. I think I like this a little bit better. A little bit more separation between these things, all right? And it's kind of cool the way that kind of works out. So, here's what I want you to do. I want you to head over to GameArtInstitute.com. And when you're over there at GameArtInstitute.com, I'm going to show you real quick here. You head over into the courses section right there. Okay, once you're done there, you scroll down a little bit and you'll see in the skill tracks, you'll see the character arts, the face, and digital realism. Now, if you click the learn more, you're going to come over into this page and you're going to see the course. There's going to be a whole description about it. There's going to be some little quotes from students and people that are in there right now. The first part of this is focused on what we talked about today in terms of the artistic anatomy and understanding structure and volume, structure and form, and getting those things kind of locked in. And then as we move forward, if we scroll through this a little bit, let me get you guys over and so you're seeing this. We're going to get into PBR, topology and baking, and into the workflow that ultimately gives us this. Gives us the capacity to create a realistic character that's a real-time character sitting inside of Marmoset. That includes all the sculpting that we're going to need, right? Not just, you know, the anatomy, but getting it, not just the fat pads, but getting in there and getting the pores, right? And getting just some beautiful form, all of that stuff, right? I just love this. So amazing. Yeah. And then we're going to look at the workflow for texturing. I always love detail. It's one of the things that really drives me. All right. We're going to learn a lot about all of that different stuff. You're also going to get access to a community. We're going to be in there with everybody where we'll be doing and sharing our écorché, right? Here's Mark's. Here's me talking about some. Here's Eric Chan working and needing some critique and some feedback. Here's John. John's been just killing it right in here. So you're in with a group of people that are devoted to this, that are dedicated to this, and who really want to level up their work. You're not all by yourself, not in this class. In this class, you are here with a group of people who want to be better, and that's going to make you better. All you got to do is head over to GameArtInstitute.com, click on course, right? And then you come all the way down to the skill tracks, learn more. And that'll take you right into the page where you can get both classes, where you can get the sculpting the face and digital realism the face. And you get both of those for one low price. This may change, all right? This may change, and depending on when you watch this, there might be another entry date in here. But right now, as we're doing this, is starting for January 19th. And I am excited to share with you the tools and all of these processes that are going to help you grow in your capacity as an artist. All right? Just make sure you head over to GameArtInstitute.com, click that little courses button at the top, or the enroll. I'll see you in the course.